a special needs trust is really a way of putting money under this umbrella of what we're going to call a special needs trust for someone who receives public benefits, and it's not going to jeopardize their public benefits.
Welcome to This Way Up, the podcast dedicated to supporting parents and caregivers navigating the complex world of mental health. I'm Andrea, and each episode we dive deep into the conversations that matter, exploring the challenges, triumphs, and transformative journeys of those facing mental health struggles within their families. Whether you're here for expert advice, inspiring stories, or just a little boost to get you through the day, we've got you covered. So grab a cup of coffee, kick back, and join us as we find the bright spots in the mental health journey, because we're all climbing our way up together. Welcome back to This Way Up. This is Andrea. And I know many times on this show, we have talked about being present and living in the moment to help us reduce stress and anxiety when we are managing and dealing with our children that struggle with mental health issues or that are special needs. But today, we are going to be talking about preparing for your future to help reduce anxiety when we are managing our kids. I have invited Sara Ecklein, who is a fiduciary in special needs trusts. And she's going to be talking to us about, one, what a special needs trust is and why it is important for us to be thinking about our children's futures when maybe we aren't around to be taking care of them. So I hope you enjoy this episode. And if you do, please hit the subscribe button and share with all your friends. Also, I need to make a special note here. The sound quality is less than perfect on this recording, and I apologize. I'm not sure what happened to it. We tried to make it sound a little bit better, but next week's will sound a lot better. Thank you for being patient.
Good morning, Sara. How are you this morning?
Oh, I'm doing great. It's great to see you. Thank you for having me on the podcast.
I am so excited to have you today. I have been wanting to get somebody like you and your specialty on for several months now, and I connected with you, so I'm really excited. Let's just go ahead and start and share with everybody exactly what it is you do and what a fiduciary actually is.
Yeah. So in the state of California, we have professional fiduciary license. And I describe it as an umbrella term. And under that umbrella, we can act with different roles and capacities for our clients. So some examples are a guardian or a conservator. In California, we use the word conservator for people that are over the age of 18, so an adult.
So a conservator would then be somebody who helps somebody who's over the age of 18. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
So similar to like a guardian, that would be for a minor. It's that same role. It's just the distinction there is that it's in someone over the age of 18.
Okay.
And, even under the umbrella of conservatorship, you can support a client with different roles. So some people need support with just finances. Some people just need support with more of the healthcare person-centered decisions. And a lot of people, if they need support, it's kind of both. The thing to know about guardianships and conservatorships is that they are always court supervised. So you're always going through the court to do that. In my practice, I don't provide any of these services. So this is not an area of my specialty, but just to give listeners a general sense of the profession of professional fiduciaries and what we can do. And then we can also act as a trustee, as an executor for an estate, and we can also act as someone's agent under the durable power of attorney for finance and under the advanced healthcare directive. So I can make end-of-life care decisions for a client. I can also manage their finances if they lack capacity, and then also acting as trustees. So the nice piece about a trust is that it's in existence when you're alive and also once you pass away. So some distinctions. So with each case and client, I can support in a lot of different roles. So sometimes, often people will come to me in the planning phase. So they're working alongside their estate planning attorney. And for whatever reason, their attorney usually recommends them to work with a professional fiduciary, and they can name me in their documents as a successor trustee, as an agent in their durable power of attorney, and also in their advanced healthcare directive.
Wait, that's a lot of responsibility.
Yeah, it is a lot.
Wow. Your stress levels must be really high.
Well, I'm definitely very selective of what I say yes to. And I've also kind of begun to niche down and really begin to focus my practice. I primarily work with clients in the planning phase. And then I also specialize in an area called special needs trust. So we can dive more into what a special needs trust is, but I found that's kind of a really sweet spot for me, because special needs trusts, typically the beneficiary has some sort of disability, and I'm really responsible of managing that trust. So that pot of money that's been either left to them or that they've been unable to manage for whatever reason.
So how did you get into special needs specifically?
Yeah. So what originally brought me to this work was feeling a profound sense of calling to serving in end of life care. I was with a loved one during her last 3 days of life. And at the time, I was very young. I had graduated college, but was really in kind of this like searching for what's next. I was in a dead end job, and I felt really stuck professionally. And anyways, after kind of going through that dying process with her and being alongside, her bedside, it just felt almost just instinctual, where I had this leaning in to, to witnessing her death and being of support. And so it really was this feeling, this profound sense of calling. And I definitely had the contrast of seeing where many people lean away from the dying process. They want to avoid it. They don't want to be there. And for me, it just had a profound effect. Like all time slipped away, and everything that just really mattered kind of came to light. And so that's what really kind of kicked off my professional journey of really getting clear of, what lights me up and where I want to serve. So I started going back to school. Originally, I thought it would be a hospice nurse, and nursing ended up not being the right fit for me. And eventually I started working for a professional fiduciary out in Sacramento, and the rest is history. I just fell in love with the work. There's obviously this end of life care piece that's kind of a thread through every client that I serve. And ultimately, what I see that I do is I carry out people's final wishes. And so there's just a great responsibility in that, of course, but it's just also a great privilege and honor of being that entrusted person. So that was over 10 years ago. And I worked for 2 fiduciary agencies before starting my own practice. The last fiduciary agency I worked at really specialized in working with and serving mentally ill clients. And I was one of their case managers. So I was really like boots on the ground, working directly with clients. A lot of them I would be seeing on a weekly basis, depending on their need. Some I was, less involved. So between the case management experience, and then I also ended up managing clients' public benefits. So think of Social Security, SSI, SSDI, Medicare and Medi-Cal, all of those public benefits I manage for clients. And we'll get into special needs trusts, but having a good understanding of public benefits really goes hand in hand with special needs trust administration. So when it came time to start my own practice, it just felt like an obvious kind of area of focus for me, because I had that experience. And what I've realized is that most people are really intimidated by kind of the arena of public benefits. So that's a bit of why I do what I do and how I came to this work and why I love this work.
Well, it takes a special person to say and actually want to help somebody in their final moments. I think I might be one of those ones that would run, but
yeah,
but
yeah,
but we don't need that, right? And that's not what we need. So let me understand. I want to take a step back. You now that you're doing these services for special needs clients specifically, does a parent typically come to you early in their child situation when they first start finding out that their child is a special needs candidate and can access public benefits, or that they know that they're going to need more services as they get older, and so they come to seek you out? Do they seek it early, or is it something that they're seeking closer to the time that the child is approaching 18?
It really kind of depends. I think it depends on the person. I find, some people are, have the space and time and are proactive. I would say most times people don't know that they need me until they're working with an estate planning attorney and setting up their estate plan. So that's usually when they'll realize, oh, just let's use an example here. It's husband, wife, and maybe they just have one child who has a disability. So now they're planning for, okay, in the event, when we both pass, who is going to take care of our disabled child? And that's usually when the attorney will recommend a professional fiduciary. It really kind of depends on what they need. I would also say for my active cases where I'm currently trustee of a special needs trust, a lot of times why clients kind of come my way is that mom and dad's passed and now the sibling or a family member is acting as trustee, and it's changed the relationship, or they're too busy, or they don't want to have to be kind of the one saying no to, the budget and setting boundaries. And they just want to be able to be, that, brother or sister, or they want to just be the aunt or the cousin. And so in those examples, whoever's acting as trustee is deciding to resign. So they're stepping down and they can nominate me to take over.
That's actually an interesting point, that as parents, especially parents that have children with special needs, and if something passes, is thinking ahead to, do I really want to place that responsibility on somebody who hasn't raised my child or taken, and it is going to change that relationship and that dynamic within the relationship.
Yes. And I find especially like with money, of holding the purse strings, there can really feel like this power, dynamic. And especially in an existing family system where it can be really helpful for families to have a neutral party so that, feelings aren't hurt, or it's not like mom and dad are playing favorites. And there's obviously a whole rainbow of disabilities. So every client that I serve, it looks really different. Some people are really high functioning, you wouldn't even be able to tell that they need this level of support. They live independently, they're working, maybe they're even seniors now and retired themselves, but they've lived a full active life. And then, I have beneficiaries where they are needing a lot of support. So I'm more working with an entire team. So, just for example, I have a lot of clients, beneficiaries that are consumers with the regional center. So they have case managers. They'll be living at a lot of time a regional center boarding care. They might also be going to some sort of day program, and then having a rep payee for their public benefits. And then I'm just managing this extra pot of money for them. But I sit alongside the team. A lot of times we have, in those kind of scenarios, regular team meetings to kind of discuss what are the needs of this person and how can this trust support them.
So when we're talking specifically about, I would say, a higher needs individual, not somebody who is really kind of capable of living most of their life on their own and making some decisions. But I guess even general, I mean, like you said, I'm curious about the public benefits and that piece of it and what people should know, both parents and conservators and your clients. What are things that they should be looking out for when they're looking at their public benefits, and what is most intimidating to a lot of people?
Yeah, well, so where I kind of sit in, because usually when people start working with me, it's kind of, years, decades, I should say, not even years, decades down the road. So I'm working with an adult and they've typically already been receiving public benefits. That whole process of getting on benefits, I mean, I definitely have assessed and worked with clients that never were on benefits, but should have been. So and I don't quote me on this exact age, but I think it's around the age of 26. You want to make sure that if your child is disabled, of deeming them disabled through Social Security, of having those appropriate records, because there's a big distinction in how public benefits are calculated. But that really is not my expertise because, again, I'm not working with people on the public benefits piece. It's more of making sure that public benefits are maximized once I'm acting as trustee, if that makes sense.
I got it. That makes sense. Yes. Yeah. So you're not guiding them into that. Now, I'm sorry. I don't understand this because I don't have somebody who is disabled. Is that common knowledge then? If you've got a child who is now deemed disabled or greater needs, it's going to need public benefits, that there's somebody guiding them, a parent, early on in the process?
You would think.
Or is it okay?
But unfortunately, I find, especially in this country, everyone's kind of out for themselves. It seems like, right? There isn't that. You would assume that there would be this support. I would say that if your child is developmentally disabled, the regional center is very comprehensive service, but many people don't fall in that. And I would assume a lot of listeners here where your child is not, developmentally disabled, but mentally ill, there's just, unfortunately not that same level of service. The regional center is specific to people with developmentally disabilities. Sometimes it's both. Sometimes you're mentally ill and developmentally disabled. So I've had a lot of those clients. And what's great about that scenario is you have these real comprehensive services. But people that have only mental illness, it's what I find is you're kind of off on your own. The more that we can be proactive and build a team long before mom and dad pass, I think is the better. And I'm sure, I think that that's where we connected, because everything that you're doing is trying to support parents, support families, and having this more, team approach that you're not alone. But if you're kind of in and out, and extreme examples of in and out of psychiatric hospitals and 5150s and et cetera, you're drowning in those scenarios. I mean, so it's when you get more to baseline and you have capacity, it's beginning to, bring your head up from water and begin to create a plan.
And you know what? So many parents that are raising and caring for family members that have mental illness are just trying to get through the doggone day.
Yeah.
The last thing they're trying to, they're thinking about is what happens when I pass.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
But, yeah. Wow.
Yes. It's a lot. And even, I shared with you, my husband and I have a little one, and, she's only one, and we just completed our estate plan, and it took, even me as a professional, and I do this work, it took way longer, and I, other than, being a tired parent, we're not dealing with any crises. So I can't even imagine. But I think that that's where in the back of your mind, knowing that, okay, when you do have capacity, when things do stabilize, I think first place to start is to meeting with an estate planning attorney if there's kind of if your child is on any kind of public benefits or you're unsure and they might need to, I would suggest looking for an estate planning attorney that does specialize in special needs trusts, because how they're written is different. And you really want to make sure that this, the attorney that's guiding you is really familiar in all the rules. So I don't know if it helps to kind of touch on, special needs trusts briefly, what they are. But so a special needs trust is really a way of putting money under this umbrella of what we're going to call a special needs trust for someone who receives public benefits, and it's not going to jeopardize their public benefits. So let's just say your child is receiving SSI or SSDI. So that's where, if instead of funds going directly to the child, you put it in the special needs trust, they never manage that money. And the money needs to be spent on specific things. So there's some big no-nos in special needs trusts of what you can use the funds for and what you can't. But then that person can continue to receive their benefits and it won't lose them.
So it basically, the public benefit piece doesn't even really recognize if it's put into a special needs trust. It can see it, but it doesn't really.
Yes. I mean, they definitely do recognize it, because once that trust is funded, and, this is part of my duties as a trustee, I have to disclose that to, the appropriate parties. So Department of Social Services and Social Security. And typically with each annual, what I'm used to as an annual redetermination, they're coming to the trustee and basically auditing me of saying, this is what the funds have been used for. This is the source of the funds. They're taking copies of the trust and stuff. But that's once the trust is funded. If you're just in the planning phase, you don't need to disclose that yet because the trust hasn't been funded. And yeah, so that's kind of the piece. So I would say just because your child has a disability doesn't necessarily mean you need a special needs trust. So I think the big distinction is the public benefits piece. That's where it makes sense to go that route. And then also, you don't have to have a disability in order to have a special needs trust.
Okay, now I was confused ahead of this, Sarah,
Yes.
but now
even more. Yeah. And this is specific to what we call third-party special needs trusts, just to make things even more complicated. But the distinction, there are different types of special needs trusts, but right now what we're talking about is if you're wanting to leave money to your child or to a loved one and establishing a special needs trust, that's considered a third party because it was never their money to begin with and never went to them. There's also what's called a first party special needs trust, and that's if it was the beneficiary's money to begin with. But anyways, that's a whole other, there's different rules. And I think for listeners, it's going to be more helpful to talk about really leaving funds and a legacy for your child, and in this planning phase, what you can do.
So let me ask you real quickly, because we talked about a disability and then we talked about mental illness. And sometimes mental illness can be fluid. It can come on at a certain different time. How do we know when a child would qualify for public benefits if they're facing a mental health issue?
Yeah. Well, and I think that is what's so hard about serving this community, because things are fluid and things do change. And you might have years and years of being gravely disabled, and then you find the right, care team, medications, and things can be stable for many years. So it really depends.
And then it can go sideways again.
Yes. And it could go sideways again.
Yes. That's what I even remember when my daughter she was having, serious anxiety attacks, and I was trying to work with the school. She was going to a private school, but I wanted to get an IEP through the public school. And they're like, well, she's doing fine. I said, now, yes, right now at this moment, she's doing okay. But tomorrow, I don't know if she's going to get into a situation where she can't get back to going to school. Can you help me here? And it took a lot of fighting to get even something as simple as an accommodation through an IEP with the schools because she wasn't suffering right then. And I was like, I understand, but this is a chronic issue for her.
I think you speak to, that's such an important piece. And what I see as such an important piece with my job is that advocacy piece. For whatever reason, and anyways, that could be a podcast in itself. I think that people with mental illness are not appropriately served. Most people don't have a good understanding of serving this population when you're dealing with different agencies like, Social Security, or even just trying to find appropriate housing. This, again, is much later in life. I know it's different when you have little, your young children still at home, but later in life, it's like, okay, this person needs support, but moving them to assisted living, that's not feeling right. So that's where advocacy is, I think, just such an important piece of this.
If a parent has a child, because oftentimes mental health issues actually come up, they start to distinguish themselves in either puberty or in late teen years for boys. If a parent starts to see that their child might be suffering from some mental health issues that could potentially be something that would be debilitating for that child, what kind of things should they be doing to secure themselves in? And should they be going to their estate planner and telling them this information? It just, like you said, it's so convoluted when it comes to mental illness because you can go in and out of crises.
Yeah, it's in and out. Yeah, I think definitely beginning to build a team and working with an estate planning attorney in your area that does provide services with special needs trust is an important piece. Hopefully that person will know enough of whether or not this beneficiary might qualify and be able to connect you with a professional to support you in applying for public benefits. Some attorneys do that, but less and less I'm finding are wanting to do that. I am happy to provide you with a resource if someone's in California. I have a wonderful public benefit specialist, and he is based in Southern California, but he really can serve, I believe, the entire state. And he just knows, the ins and outs of all the Social Security rules and really does just such a wonderful job at advising the best way to go. And sometimes it's just a consult and knowing, this person isn't going to qualify, I wouldn't pursue it. But that at least can check it off the list of things for you to do. So I would say, reaching out to a public benefit specialist, if you have any kind of inkling or wondering, will my child qualify or should we get them qualified, reaching out to someone like that, and also begin to establish your estate plan and meeting with an estate planning attorney who does provide services and can draft a special needs trust. So something to know about me is that I administer special needs trusts. So I act as a trustee, but I don't draft special needs trusts. I'm not an attorney. My license, I cannot give legal advice, financial advice, tax advice. So think of a professional fiduciary as we're more, we're acting once either you've named that professional in your estate planning documents, or if we've been appointed by the court. So in those other scenarios, I really specialize in private cases, not court supervised cases. So it's, again, a very narrow kind of window of what I service.
I'm curious about the relationship between you and the family and the people that you support. Is it something that becomes fairly intimate between you and the family? Or you had mentioned earlier when you were a caseworker that sometimes you were seeing clients on a weekly basis. Is that something that do you become so much a part of their life, or are you more of like an administrator?
Yes. So again, it's going to really depend on the client. With families that I serve only in the planning phase, I have a thorough intake process. So for some clients, it's just really kind of completing my intake process. I stay in touch with clients on an annual basis. I find if we don't have that annual drumbeat and check in, too much can happen. And it's, everyone lives busy, full lives. You're not going to think of notifying your successor trustee when you move or change your number. And so that's where I like to just have an annual check in. And then I even have some clients in the planning phase where they want, their child to at least have a sense of who I am. So even just last month, I went out and I did a home visit. I met with the parents. I met with their disabled daughter who's in her early 20s, and really just kind of get a sense of who I am. I get to see, their child and know who she is, and just begin to introduce the concept of what it is. And every kind of child has a different understanding.
Well, I was just going to say it, depending on how disabled they really are too, it can.
Yeah. So it really, that's where it's more, obviously you as the parent, you're going to know best of, can my child even conceptualize this? Is this helpful? So for those families where I think it does make sense to introduce me is really, does it give you guys peace of mind? Does it give you guys the sense of relief? Because even me in my 30s, it's like, this couple was in their 50s. So hopefully by the time they need services, I will be retired. But again, it's like, how far do we want to think out? And, some people have a style where they're thinking, years out, or they're thinking worst case scenarios. Oh, if God forbid we get into, I don't know, a car accident or we both pass away. Sometimes there's only one parent. There's not that two. So that also, there's not as, backup feeling with your spouse if it's just you and then your disabled child. So I find with my single clients that it definitely gives them typically more peace of mind of spending more time getting to know each other and, coming out and doing a home visit and all of that. So,
right. Any advice that you would give to parents, even new parents like yourself that have a 1-year-old? And, none of us think about that stuff. None of us. There are a lot of people that are forward thinkers, but we're so focused on the here and the now, and we're busy parents.
The immediate need, right?
The immediate need. Any advice that you would give to parents in general about, what it is that you should be looking at for your future kids if something happens?
Yeah, well, I think it's just, this is such an important piece of having an estate plan. Only 1 in 3 people in this country have one, which is just kind of crazy that only really 30% of us have an estate plan in place. These documents are dictating not only, where your money goes once you pass, but they also are kind of dictating what, who do you want to be making decisions for yourself as you age? If you're incapacitated, if, for example, you're brain dead, it's like, who's going to be making those decisions? And I think that this community that if your child is not able to fill that role and support you that much more need to be building a team, because you can't do it alone. Where I see, things just being so much more painful, not as efficient, also more expensive and costly. This is after parents have passed, is for the families that never thought about it, that did it alone. And unfortunately, I have seen kind of those horror stories, those worst case scenarios, people with a disabled child, and they did it alone. They never built a team. And then once, mom and dad both pass, this person's working with a stranger. The state has to get involved. Everything's going through the courts. And there's so much that you can do proactively so that really you're beginning to build that team long before services are needed.
Right.
And I think that must give, I know for me, we can't do it alone as parents. We really can't. We need to have that team for our own well-being. The more that we are taking care of ourselves and nurturing our own garden, the more that we can really show up. And obviously it's so hard to do when your child's an absolute crisis, but you have to do it. You have to do it, and you have to welcome the support. So professional fiduciaries are kind of one piece of that. And not every family, I would say most families don't need that. But I think that if you do have a child with mental illness, it can really kind of give families such peace to have that neutral party, so that, if they have siblings, they're not having to kind of fill those shoes and take on that responsibility.
Mental illness can be very complex and very harrowing and very emotional too. Mental illness can dive deep into the emotions with people, and then you pile money and responsibility on top of it. That's going to be really, really difficult.
Yeah. And unfortunately, I've taken over from some siblings acting in that role, and it ruined the relationship. So I do have a few cases where they're not in each other's lives anymore and there's no contact. So, that's where I think proper planning and kind of thinking about all of these scenarios, it really could potentially salvage a relationship, because, there's not that like sibling kind of dynamic of one, needing to make decisions for the other.
Right. You said something that we've repeated in many different areas along our episodes here, is you got to welcome the support. And typically we're talking about, the emotional support on the side of it. But I love that you said even on offloading some of that responsibility or stress onto a professional for some things. So support comes in so many different fashions when you're dealing with mental health issues with your kids and parenting and everything else. It truly does take a team and a whole community to support our kids and our loved ones through any mental health crisis.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, you have a very, very special role, an important role, and I have several notes here that I've already started taking on ideas of my own here, because I just think there needs to be mental health. One is so misunderstood still. It's still in the early stages of being accepted widely and being understood as to, okay, what is a mental health illness versus a mental health crisis versus just mental health or mental health in general. But then on top of it, the system is so convoluted, whether you're getting care, now the services that are supported. So people like you out there specializing is something that is a gift to this community. And I hope that, you continue to expand on that.
Oh, thank you for saying that. This has been such a great conversation. Thank you for having me. It's always lovely to see you.
Thanks for tuning in to This Way Up. I hope you're feeling a little lighter, a little brighter, and ready to take on whatever comes next. Remember, the journey of mental health is all about progress, not perfection. So keep climbing. And don't forget to celebrate the small wins. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who could use a little lift.